Mike Rodak had this. He did a story on Greg Byrne, who's the AD at Alabama. This is somewhat ironic here, but he told Tide 1009 or 100.9 that he's concerned about the trend of college coaches leaving for the NFL. I think the NFL lifestyle is becoming more attractive to coaches in general. And so is it? And that's interesting that an AD at a school like Alabama, by the way, they've dipped into that themselves. This all came because they brought up, Byrne brought up Boston College head coach Jeff Hafley going to the Packers. It's certainly one of the less resourced head coaching jobs out there, and I don't say that disparagingly at all. They've got a great program at Boston College, but he left to go become a defensive coordinator in the NFL. You would have never thought about that in the past.
No, you wouldn't have. Well, one, look, money in the NFL is just going to keep going up and up and up. I mean, for their coordinators and everything. Because, again, if you want the good coordinators, you want to keep them in the league, you're going to have to raise their salary. Just like the coordinator salaries went up in college football because you don't want them to leave. And then now that, like, there are, there's nonsensical rules or things that just intersect so hard in college football. The NFL has always had a very, and you're going to work hard, but it's always had a very regimented and blocked off, structured offseason. So it goes from this thing to this thing to this thing, and then that's it.
And let me read this quote, Craig, and then you respond, please. I think the NFL, from a calendar standpoint, from not having to deal with a lot of the other extracurricular things you deal with in the college ranks when it comes to NIL, transfer portal, recruiting calendar, I think the NFL lifestyle is becoming more attractive to coaches in general. And when they have a good opportunity to get there, some of them are taking advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that all rings true, and I do think it's too early still to say that there is absolutely a movement of college coaches going to the NFL and it being for all those different reasons, but I do think there are signs that it's starting to head in that direction, and there you have Greg Byrne going on the record and saying the complete obvious there. I'll put it this way. I'm a college football fan first and foremost. It's my favorite sport. It always has been more than anything else, and I still love it, and it's still number one. Baseball's had its time. I liked basketball there for a while, but I just don't care as much anymore about that side of things outside of the Mavericks. But yeah, college football is my bread and butter, and I'll tell you, as a fan, the NFL lifestyle feels more appealing because I'm fortunate in that the team I root for is always going to have money, and they're always going to be in a good conference, and they're going to be just fine as far as realignment and all of that stuff goes. But even still, I'm looking around, and they're one of the ones that benefits from everything and going, this isn't really all that fun, of not knowing who's on the roster, not knowing, like, at any moment what massive changes set to occur. Your quarterback could win the Heisman and then get bought by your rival the very next year. That doesn't happen regularly, but it could happen in theory the way that things are currently set up. I think that it's just too unruly, and so I'm looking at that as just a fan. I'm not saying I'm any less of a college football fan. I'm just saying, as a fan, I can see why the NFL is becoming more appealing just from a fan standpoint, because I know that my team's going to get a fair crack at the draft, and that the way that they finish is going to depend on, that's going to set up who they get to pick, and then they have these rules in place about how they can go about tweaking their roster, but they can't just go grab the starting wide receiver from somebody without, breaking a rule. Like, you got to do it. Like, there's tampering. At least a framework there. Yeah. There's tampering that actually exists. There's not agents and DMs offering money to high school kids. There's not all that nefariousness still going on. So that part of it, I do like, although I still do love the madness of college football. So basic point I'm getting at is, if I feel that way as a fan who has no skin in the game other than just rooting for the product, how would somebody who's actually working on that product feel with having to deal with all of those challenges as compared to, hey, you don't have to hit the road recruiting for one. You go bounce around and you go to some pro days and you maybe go visit a campus here and there, but for the most part, it's all set up and structured. You know that nobody can swoop in and offer an extra $1 million the night before you're getting ready to sign this guy because you just pick them. So that's just the draft example, but the hours on the road, the hours dealing with the conversations having nothing to do with football, but with all of the other stuff that you're dealing with, the year-to-year aspect of it. I think it's obvious, and anybody who's trying to argue that there's not an obvious sort of switch in the room going on, I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing out on something. I don't think so, though, because I think it's pretty clear that there's a more favorable structure in place and a more favorable schedule and same kind, if not more money, and that's all in the NFL right now. I don't know, outside of just a love for developing players or a love for Saturdays, what inherent advantages college football has over the NFL right now as far as a coaching job goes. Now, maybe you'd say the pressure, but I don't know. I guess that would depend on the job in college football, because there are some where you can get by just making bowl games, and that's fine. There are others that if you're not winning 10 games by year 3, you're on the hot seat and done. And the NFL can be a little bit different. But, yeah, for the most part, I think the NFL is as attractive as it's ever been for a college football coach.
Well, here's another quote from Greg Byrne, and his school, by the way, is guilty of being a part of this. The group of 5 head coaches leaving now for assistant jobs at Power 5, including Alabama. Maurice Lindquist from Buffalo, a head coach. South Alabama's Kane Womack as a head coach, now both at Alabama. Georgia State coach, remember last week, Sean Elliott, last week leaving for South Carolina to become a tight ends coach and run game coordinator. In some ways, I can't blame them. I do remind them, though, that if you do have to go through choppy waters, there's not a better place to do that than Alabama. But that doesn't mean that we're immune from those choppy waters, because we still deal with that on a daily basis.
Well, especially now that Nick Saban's gone. No, but it's true. Like, you might be the most advantaged in the marketplace, but that doesn't mean that you still don't have to go out and compete for it. You know, like you can. You know, McDonald's still has to sell cheeseburgers against everybody else, even though that they know they're always going to. You know, they still have to maintain the top rung or whatever. So, yeah, it is different, and these are the things that you fight against collective bargaining, you fight against that, you fight against all this. But if you did it, your life would probably be easier, because the people that are doing it, they do have, like, professional sports have structure in the offseason. There's consequences. Look, and if you want to say, like, oh, when does that happen in the NFL? Just a couple years ago, the Dolphins got in trouble for tampering with Tom Brady and lost a first-round draft pick and a third-round draft pick, I believe, this year. So, again, there are
consequences. Did they
consequences.
turn around and sue the NFL and try to disrupt the entire organization? That don't happen?
Stephen Ross took his medicine and
shut the hell up
and shut up about it because he didn't want to lose his team. And
because otherwise he's going to get fined $50 million, even if he's a billionaire.
That's what I do appreciate now at this point, because college football is so many blurry lines, and I'm just one that operates better when it's like just clear cut. Like, tell me what's what, and I'll adjust to that. But like the whole blurry lines, and sometimes it matters, and sometimes I don't know. That part to me of college football is just hard to kind of wrap my arms around. But I don't think that we're all necessarily talking about the exact same thing here. I mean, it's one thing for the Buffalo head coach in college to go join the Alabama staff. There's only 32 jobs in the NFL. You know, and in the NIL world, being the Buffalo head coach isn't what it was like 5 years ago. Because now all of the work that you put in can be over just like that, because somebody slides into the DMs of your roster and starts taking them and spreading them around the country to this ACC school or that SEC school or whatever. So, I mean, if you're not at one of the best jobs in college football, you're always being attacked, really. You're always on the defense, and that's sort of been the case for the most part. I mean, you're always at an inherent disadvantage. Basically, anybody versus, let's say, in comparison to a Texas or to an Ohio State or to a Michigan, they've always had advantages, but they have more than they've ever had before. Like, there's no lack of advantages they have at this point, because now, even when they don't recruit well, they can just go pick apart the rosters of the people below them and make up for it in like 6 months.
Yep.
There's no downfall to being one of those schools. Like,
nope.
Nothing matters if you make a mistake, because you have the money to overcome that. Whereas the lower levels, like, dude, you landed that receiver, that's a big deal. But as hard as you work to get him, you now have to work twice as hard just to keep him for a second year. And so, like, if you're at Buffalo, where's the enjoyment in that?
Yeah.
The guy that you actually get that maybe makes it worthwhile for you, you're constantly having to battle him from the moment he steps foot on campus. And that's just a small example of one player on one roster and one school. So, then you add in the NIL and just forget other people trying to pick apart your guys, just you in general having to keep your roster happy now with NIL deals. And so the whole package, the recruiting added to that, it's just, I think it's as much of an unbalanced field as we've ever seen. So Chip Kelly was a definite wave because that was a guy leaving a big job for a coordinator. Now, you can argue that he was on his way out regardless, and he just cut it off at the pass, and that's probably to some extent what happened. But still, it wouldn't be shocking, I think, at this point if he just said, like, no, I just got tired of doing all the other nonsense. I really just want to go coach the offense. We'd believe him if we didn't know about the hot seat, because it all sounds so dadgum stressful.
But even if you're on a hot seat, you're going to get paid if you're fired.
But the hot
he had to end up probably paying a buyout himself.
The hot seat is probably the bigger part of that. But it's not the whole story, right? So it's part of it.
It is.
And look, when you throw in NIL into this and you throw in the transfer portal, if you're Maurice Lindquist at Buffalo, you don't even necessarily have to worry about somebody calling up your best player. If your best player just goes in the transfer portal because he's trying to gauge his value, teams may not even looked at him yet, which is highly unlikely. But if he's good enough, then all of a sudden people are going to go.
Teams have already not only looked at him, they've already probably contacted him through a third person.
But no, my point being is, even if you didn't experience that with a guy, him putting his name in the portal and then you going, hey, we need a linebacker. And like, oh, look at this guy's film. So they even does it for you. So even when it doesn't happen to you, when you're not tampered with, all the player has to do is say, I'm leaving, and then you will get tampered with.
Mike Porter in the chat room. I love college football. Definitely my favorite as well. I love all the conferences, but with the NIL, player portal, conference realignment, networks and streaming services, and other turmoil makes it hard. I don't think you could have written it any better than that. That doesn't mean we're saying that people or players or coaches don't deserve to make their decisions, but it does, man. If we're worn out by just covering it, what is it like, as you said, when you're in the middle of it?
Yeah, I mean, you can't even celebrate fully half the things that used to be able to celebrate, in full, like landing a big 5-star recruit. You got him for 3-4 years, barring something completely unforeseen. And now, for all you know, he just signed yesterday, and there's already a team in his DMs or contacting his grandpa or whatever, trying to, get into his head for next year. And just so I think all those things combined, again, still my number one sport, but it has taken some hits here lately with just the whole calamity and the whole craziness of it all. Part of that's the fun. Part of that's what we love about it. Like realignment, for example. As much as it hurts and sucks if you're on one end of it at times, like the Pac-12 last year or Oregon State and Washington State still right now, it can be something that sucks, but at the same time, still love college football and the way that it's set up, even if it's not always the most fun thing in the world. But yeah, it's just it's getting harder to kind of be as joyful about it all because there's so many crazy things that are happening all the time that just never seem to cease.
If you took a poll of the 131 schools in Division I or FBS football, if you took a poll of how much of you not enjoying watching the games when the season begins, but how many of you actually enjoy football today? There might be 15 or 20 schools that say they do, because they're the ones that they're the ones that can survive losing their own player or two because they can turn around and get somebody else. And the timing of it is crazy, but it's and it all because of nobody had any opportunities to do what they wanted to do or get paid, et cetera, for the longest of time, and now the NCAA has it being jammed right down their throat.
Well, not everything has to be like, do you love it as much as you used to, and I'll romanticize it and all those things. I still love it. I still love college football. That's why I prefaced everything I said with that, but I'm not a casual or less of a college football fan or anything like that, because I would like to just see a little bit of rule making, and I think that's sort of where most people are at this point, is just to have an idea of what's going on and what to expect. And that's the benefit of the NFL, is you already know the calendar, you know when things are allowed and when they're not, and that's something even college football doesn't have a great grasp on, is their calendar. It's too crowded in December and January, and it's this and that. So anyways, they've got a lot of things to work out. They can make the product better. Let's all agree on that. The product can be better than it is, and that's what they're